Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast. Hey, Robert.
Hey, Thomas.
I had my phone out the other day and I had my Star Plus 3D something program that I use, and I pointed it right up at the sun, and I noticed that the sun was in Pisces. But we're doing this in early April, and everybody knows that early April is Aries season. What's going on here? We have a listener question to ask just that. Let me play it for you right here.
I know quite a few people who've dismissed the validity of astrology based on the precessing of the zodiac. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that and maybe offer some talking points about how to respond to that kind of comment. Thank you.
And it's yours.
Wow, what a great question. It really is a great question, and one that I think every astrologer needs to address in their own hearts and souls, if nowhere else. It's based on the precession of the equinoxes, which is a part of the great year, which is 26,000 and change years long. So, for example, and now one place you can go, anybody who has this question, to get really full information is Google it. The difference between between sidereal astrology, let's say, and tropical astrology. About 2,000 years ago, the vernal equinox, which is the beginning of Aries, actually coincided. The signs and the zodiac and the constellations coincided with each other about 2,000 years ago when astrology was really beginning to flourish in Western civilization. There is a difference between the signs and the constellations. They are not the same thing. And this is where the area of confusion begins. And philosophically, there's something also to consider. Many people still think that the constellations or the signs impart some magic rays to those of us alive on Earth. There are people who think that, like the sun, it's the life giver. Without the sun, we have no life on Earth. So, philosophically, it is true that the rays of the sun affect our human existence. You could call them magic rays if you want. And beneath that, many people still feel, oh, you have Venus in Sagittarius. Therefore, the planet Venus, when it's in Sagittarius, imparts some magic rays that affect my life on Earth. This is not the case. There are no magic rays anywhere. The constellations and the signs were never more than markers of seasons between the earth and the sun and the planets. So the signs are like road markers in a way. 2,000 years ago, at the beginning of Aries, that's when the actual constellation of Aries rose heliacally, meaning just before sunrise, on the eastern horizon. Well, because of the precession of the equinoxes, they moved backwards. So from 2,000 years ago, the vernal equinox has moved backwards from 29 Aries all the way back through Aries, and then it went into Pisces, and it went from 29 Pisces back to the beginning of Pisces, and then crossed over into Aquarius, which brings us to the age of Aquarius. So, in terms of these ages of the great year, the constellations do have, and the precession of the equinoxes does have an important meaning, which is very worthwhile you're studying. But in truth, it doesn't matter what sign is appearing on the eastern horizon heliacally at the vernal equinox. It's still spring on the equator, which is where the cradle of civilization began. So these are seasonal markers. They don't have really anything to do with the actual constellation behind them. So today, the constellation is different from the sign that we use in astrology. So this begins to, hopefully, Thomas, explain the confusion here. Vedic astrologers and Hindu astrologers, many of them use sidereal astrology. Many, not many, but a percentage of American and Western astrologers do use the sidereal zodiac. And so we're not going to get into an argument over which one is right and wrong, but there is a fundamental difference here. Astrology is not causal. Causal. Astrology causes nothing. It is synchronous, which is a term that Carl Jung coined to explain the validity of astrology. These cycles, the planetary cycles, the lunar cycles, the solar cycles, the Mars cycles, and so on, those cycles in relationship to Earth have been studied for, get this, 48,000 years. How do we know? There's an animal femur bone with the phases of the moon carved on it that has been carbon dated to 48,000 years old. So we know that for at least that long, mankind has been correlating these celestial cycles, which are visible to the naked eye out to Saturn, correlating these cycles and their relationships to the Earth because of the Earth's orbit and their orbits around the sun for 48,000 years, and making observations about times of feast or famine, times of war and peace, and so on. So Carl Jung called astrology the oldest recorded database of human observation the world has ever known. He also coined this term synchronicity. So when you say, I'm born in Aries or I'm born a Scorpio, that's shorthand for I am born at this season of the year. And that season remains the same no matter what the constellation is that happens to be rising helically at the vernal equinox. Does this make any sense, Thomas? Am I bollocksing this up for you?
Well, it does. And I'll tell you, I have never heard it said like you just did that there is a separation between the sign and the constellation. Wow. So the sign is what we're focused on, and that's why Western tropical zodiac works the way that it does, because it's a marker of time, it's a marker of season. I get it. I hope our caller does.
Well, I'm glad because you put it very simply, and that's the truth. The seasons don't change because of the relationship between the Earth and the Sun. The background of the constellations that changes, but it's very interesting and very important to study the precession of the equinoxes in relation to human history. And by the way, the ancient Egyptians even knew about the precession of the equinoxes because we've seen hieroglyphs carved in Egyptian tombs that reflect this. So it's not new, but it's fascinating to study the relationship of the equinoxes, the vernal equinox in particular, which from the standpoint of the Sphinx, which faces due east, by the way. So the Sphinx is staring. When the Sphinx was constructed, which is much older than we are told, and Graham Hancock and some others have gone into this, the Sphinx was constructed at a time when it was facing the constellation of Leo. The Sphinx originally is the body of a lion, for example. So these ancient correlations, you go back to the age of Taurus, for example. And in the Bible, this is referred to as the era when people worshipped the golden calf, the bull, Taurus. The equinox is precessed back from Taurus into Aries, the sign of the ram. And this was the emergence of the Judaic religion. It's the oldest Abrahamic religion. It's about 5,700 something years old. The sign of the ram. And today still, on high holy days, Jewish rabbis blow the ram's horn, the shofar. So Judaism and Aries are linked. And then the processions kept going backwards through Aries until they finally entered Pisces, which is the emergence of Christianity, another Abrahamic religion, the sign of the fishes. And Jesus Christ is associated with the fisher of men, and so on. So the processions have historic and religious and philosophical significance that is astonishing and quite beautiful. But on an individual level, a daily life, the planets don't exert any magic rays. All you're looking at, and the signs are, which are not the same as the constellations, the signs are simply shorthand markers for characteristics of the seasons. And there are 12 of them. So they merge into each other in some subtle ways, more than the four seasons, summer, winter, spring, and fall, that we're all used to. They're actually 12. And you can, of course, divide these even further when you get down into using decanates and dwads. Now we're getting into technical astrology. So these ever finer divisions become very helpful in interpreting. But I hope this clears that up a little. It's a beautiful question. I'm glad she asked and brought it to us.
Well, and as you mentioned too, there's a plethora of information on this, and she had it right. Precession of the equinoxes is the term to search on Google, and you can get more information there. Robert, thank you so much. And to our caller, thanks for a great question.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast from Robert's house. We'll be back in a future episode. Thanks for watching and listening.